10 Commandments for Atheists. Thought we already had those. This is Wretched Radio. Penn Jillette, he's the atheist. He doesn't, well, that would be an understatement. He hates God. And that would probably be an understatement, too. He's half the magician of Penn and Teller. And he has written a book called God, No! You know, I was thinking about writing a book, too. Flying Spaghetti Monster, no. Because I want to dedicate hours and hours of my life fighting against this megalomaniacal, horrible piece of pasta.
That you don't really believe in.
Because it doesn't actually exist. Because, you know, they used to put people in a padded cell for spending time arguing against something that they don't even think exists. But that's what the atheists do, that just rail against God. Penn Jillette came up with 10 commandments for atheists when the reality is the 10 commandments actually are for atheists. They're supposed to be a schoolmaster to lead Penn Jillette to the Lord. At any rate, he came up with the 10 commandments, and to him I would say, hey, quit trying to impose your values on me. You keep your commandments off my body, magician. Or, better yet, I might suggest, Penn, how dare you? You don't even know what morals are without God. Didn't say you can't be moral, but what I'm saying is you can't have morals, morality, right and wrong if you are an atheist. All you can have are preferences. That is it. Nothing more than simply exchanging, well, this is what I prefer, this is what you prefer. That's it. No winner, no loser. Just preferences. According to Penn Jillette, the highest ideals are human intelligence, creativity, and love. Respect these above all. That's kind of fascinating, isn't it? The highest ideals are human intelligence. That to me screams, therefore, who is God? Well, not just humans, but I would suggest the smartest human. Should he not be respected above all? Isn't that where that leads? Number 2, do not put things or even ideas above other human beings. Number 3, say what you mean even when talking to yourself. What used to be an oath to God is now quite simply respecting yourself. Me. Number 4, put aside some time to rest and think. Number 5, be there for your family. Love your parents. That's funny that it happens to be number 5. Your partner and your children. Love is deeper than honor. Parents matter, but so do spouse and children. You know, let's say that I don't agree with that. Who wins, Penn? You know what, I disagree. I think that greed comes before love. How dare you tell me that I'm wrong? Number 6, respect and protect all human life. I thought this was fascinating. In parentheses, he writes, many believe that thou shalt not kill only refers to people in the same tribe. I say it's all human life. I wonder if he means babies in the womb. 7, keep your promises. 8, don't steal. 9, don't lie. Hey, these are our commandments. And number 10, don't waste too much time wishing, hoping, and being envious. It will make you bug nutty. In other words, don't covet is what he's trying to say. Sorry, Penn. You can't have commandments. You can only have preferences. Which brings us to, thanks to Frank Turek, of his cosmos argument to prove that what we already know is true, God exists, the moral argument.
The M in cosmos stands for the moral argument. If just one thing is morally wrong out there, like, for example, it's wrong to kill Jews, or it's wrong to torture babies for fun, or it's wrong to participate in a religious crusade, then there has to be a God. Why? Because if there is no God, it's just your opinion against, say, Hitler's opinion. It's just your opinion against bin Laden's opinion. We all intuitively understand that certain things are objectively right and objectively wrong. Now, I got to be very careful here because Christopher may say that I'm saying he can't be moral. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying atheists can't be moral. I'm not saying atheists don't know morality. They know morality just like anybody else. I'm not saying anything about the behavior of atheists or religious people. I'm only saying that an atheist can't justify why a certain thing is objectively right or a certain thing is objectively wrong. Atheistic materialism can't provide a moral standard. Molecules have no authority to tell you what to do. They don't. I mean, if we're just overgrown germs with no ultimate purpose, why not kill or rape to get what you want? Why not? It seems to me that atheism has no way to deal with this objection. C.S. Lewis was an atheist at one point, and he thought evil disproved God until he realized that evil actually pointed to God, because evil pointed to good, and you wouldn't know good unless you knew God. In fact, here's what Lewis said. As an atheist, my argument against God was that the universe seems so cruel and unjust. But how had I got this idea of just and unjust? A man does not call a line crooked unless he has some idea of a straight line. What was I comparing this universe with when I called it unjust? Bottom line, since objective moral values exist, God exists.
Victims speak out about North Carolina sterilization program which targeted women, young girls, and blacks. This is something that we talked about on our wonderful DVD On the Shoulders of Giants, available at wretchedradio.com. The legacy of Charles Darwin was the eugenics movement, thanks to people like Margaret Sanger and a lot of famous people, quite honestly. There were many people in the early 20th century that were rather fond of eugenics, sterilization, forced, including Dr. Clarence Gamble of the Procter & Gamble Company, James Haynes of the Hosiery Company. All thought eugenics was a wonderful idea. Now, people today are coming out and saying, hey, I was sterilized in North Carolina. Why? Because this program went on all the way through the 70s. It started out in the 1920s, specifically in North Carolina. 1929 actually ended in 1974. The law that said you can sterilize people that were considered idiots, their terminology, not mine. It didn't get off the books until 2003. And now some people are stepping forward and they're saying, hey, we were done wrong. You know what Penn Jillette would have to say? You know what Christopher Hitchens would have to say to these people? No, you weren't. You didn't prefer it, but you weren't done wrong because we don't know what it is. They cannot take a moral position and state this is right, this is wrong. The atheist cannot stake out that turf. Now, having said that, this story is truly sad. As is the case in so many articles these days, they start out with an anecdote, which almost always, by the way, positions the story. I don't think it's good journalism to be starting out with a story. What do? This is a Greg Boyd tactic, by the way. You tell the sad story about somebody, and then you give the information behind it. And you're already predisposed. You've already know which way you should feel about it, because you've been set up with a tear-jerking story. Well, this is a tear-jerking story, and I agree. The state of North Carolina is culpable, guilty. I can use those terms. I'm a Christian. And they should do something for these people. They talk about a girl who actually testified, Elaine Riddick, 13 years old when she got pregnant, after being raped by a neighbor in North Carolina in 1967. How tragic is that? The state ordered that immediately after giving birth, she should be sterilized. Doctors cut and tied off her fallopian tubes. The little girl was raped, and they did that to her. Riddick was never told what was happening. Quote, go to the hospital, and they got to the hospital, and they put me in a room, and that's all I remember. When I woke up with bandages on my stomach. The state eugenics board in Raleigh had approved a recommendation that she be sterilized. They labeled her as feeble-minded. That's what they would do. You're not very smart. We think you are lower than us. Therefore, for the sake of society, we are going to make sure that you don't breed anymore. Now, some people, like Margaret Sanger, would go even further. Some people like, what was that guy's name with that funky little mustache? Oh, yeah, Adolf Hitler would go even further. Let's kill the living that are feeble-minded, that are morons, that perhaps have some criminal bent. Let's get rid of those people. It was called the eugenics movement, and really the scientific support that they used to justify their behavior was really none other than Charles Darwin. Now, I didn't say that Charles Darwin wrote to them and said, do this, but his theory led them to conclude that it would be okay. And so it is, the eugenics movement in North Carolina went on until 1974. But you say, well, that was just North Carolina. Nope. 30 other states had government-run eugenics programs. And by the 1960s, tens of thousands of Americans were sterilized as a result of these programs to eliminate society ills and improve society's gene pool. Proponents of the theory argue that those that exhibited the traits of an idiot or a criminal should be sterilized. Why? Well, you don't want to breed down. That doesn't help us evolve. It began as a way also to control welfare spending. A third of the sterilizations performed in North Carolina were done on girls under the age of 18. Some as young as 9 years old. 85% of the victims female. 40% were non-white, meaning black. The population in North Carolina is not 40% black. Undoubtedly, there was a racist component in this. This was a result of atheistic worldview, supported scientifically by Charles Darwin. And these days, the atheists dare not say it was wrong because they simply cannot take a moral position. More proof for the obvious that God exists. Frank Turek in his Cosmos argument. We are now up to the O, objectivity.
The O in Cosmos stands for objectivity. Objectivity, particularly in the laws of logic, mathematics, and even science. In fact, this debate and any debate presupposes that there is an objective standard of truth out there that our minds can access and understand. Christopher says he's closer to that objective standard, and I'm saying, no, I'm closer to that objective standard. If there's no objective standard out there, what are we doing up here but emoting?
Exactly.
But it doesn't seem to me like there can be an objective standard of truth, an immaterial standard in an atheistic worldview, because we're just molecules in motion. In fact, how do the laws of logic and reason itself exist if we are just molecules in motion? There are immaterial realities out there that we all know and we all understand. Christopher tries to make an argument, a logical argument against God. Well, where does he get logic from? If we're just molecules in motion. If atheism is true, you have no grounds to believe it or anything else. Our thoughts are just chemical reactions in the brain. In fact, macroevolution doesn't help either, because macroevolution does not yield truth, it yields survivability. In fact, Dawkins points this out. He says, basically, that there's a gene or there's something going on chemically in us that makes more people believe in God. And you know what? When more people believe in God, they tend to survive better. Of course, Dawkins thinks that believing in God is false. So here's evolution trying to show people that they ought to believe in God, or that somehow gets them to believe in God, but the belief in God, according to him, is false. Evolution yields survivability, not truth. So if evolution is true, you ought not believe it. Even Darwin recognized this. It's called Darwin's doubt. He said, with me, the horrid doubt always arises whether the convictions of man's mind, which have been developed from the mind of lower animals, are of any value or at all trustworthy. Why should you believe in Darwinism if Darwinism is true? Your mind is just the result of lower animals.
And it's not a very cheery thought, is it? I mean, really? Really? That's all I am? How different is the worldview that says, no, you were made in the image and likeness of God. You actually bear the mark, the image of God himself. No, you're not a little God, but you are made in his image, in his likeness. Do you think that might change the mindset and the behavior of some of the kids in the high schools these days? Rather than being taught, hey, whatever, you're molecules in motion. Have at it, you animals. Ha! Versus you're made in the image of God.